And approval of the February 11th minutes.
I would make a motion to approve those.
Motion made and
Second.
seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, you just screwed me up.
Oh.
I need a copy of agenda.
Let me do this.
I'll just give you this so you have the hard copy.
I don't need the hard copy. I need to know where to go. Don't tell me where to go.
Perfect.
Okay. The financial update, which now can be popped back up on the screen.
Sure. And
And Matt was nice enough not to make it, Michelle does sometimes.
so I thought I would just take a step back because if this committee remembers a couple months ago when COVID started, we sort of put a hiatus on the program because we didn't know where we'd be from a budget standpoint. And we didn't know if we would need to tap into these funds to potentially plug a budget deficit at the city. But the committee did weigh in and we agreed to allocate about $165,000 for our small business assistance program. Did some really quick hitting either $500, $1,500, or $3,000 grants to businesses downtown. And that came out of this fund and that depleted the fund.
Do we have a list, not the,
Oh, yeah. Can easily circulate that. Yeah, we did about 90 businesses.
okay, and that's more, I don't need
Yep.
to know names. That was
And-
not,
And all those you guys could approve administratively, right? So that we don't need a motion on any of that.
Correct. You guys weighed in on whether we could allocate a
Yes.
portion of
Right.
our remaining funds to that program, and then the city staff, when John Story was still here, administered it. Yeah, but if anyone for any reason wanted to see the list, we do have.
I was just curious to how many people, so.
Sure.
It was
About
well
90.
received.
Yeah, yep, about 90
I guess I'm
businesses.
more concerned about that than who.
Sure. So once we made that allocation, that left us with sort of sitting in the pot about $60,000. Not a lot, but still we decided to sit on it to see if we could open the program up later or whether we would need that to plug a budget gap. But since then, we also did something financially in terms of flopping a funding source for a project, which some of you may know because it did have to go to commission. But if you guys will remember, this committee and ultimately our commission made multiple allocations to Bob Hare's projects on East Water Street, where Lake Erie Shores and Islands is going, and then eventually a future commercial tenant. And that total was $192,500 over multiple years that this committee made. And we realized that those projects are actually in the downtown Chesapeake TIF boundary. And we had some remaining Chesapeake TIF allocation. So we went back to commission and actually flipped the funding source for Bob Hare's projects to the Chesapeake TIF, which allowed us to put another $192,500 back into this pot of money that this committee administers. So when you take that $192,500 and add in the roughly $60,000 in money that remained unspent, up at the very top on the right-hand side, you'll see a highlighted sort of ending balance that shows as of today, we have about $250,630 in available non-committed funds. I will note, we've had a lot of conversations internally, obviously through Michelle, about of that 250, how much do we want to sort of open up and allocate to potential projects? And based on those conversations, she was thinking maybe we start with 150,000 and hold back 100,000 to see if and when we will need it, which I think makes sense in that it still gives us a pot to fall back on if we need it, but also allows us to respond to what we think are going to be between this project we're here to consider and next month, 2 to 3 really important projects.
That also allows us to have a little more time to figure out where in the world the city budget's going.
Exactly, exactly. So out of this pot, we'll get some onto the streets, but also hold some back, and hold back more than we actually had a couple months ago if we need to help plug the budget gap. So that's the thought. As always, the top portion is projects that we've committed to. If they're green, that means we've dispersed them. And then we always have on the bottom left-hand side of this form or report is a list of what were all the outstanding projects coming into the year. If they've since been highlighted green or red, that either we've dispersed the funds and they're done, or we've rescinded or moved the funds away from the projects. So the good news is we really only have 6 projects hanging out there from past commitments prior to 2020. So
I know we had a conversation, past commitments, about how long to give the people, and I don't know if you were here for that meeting or not, okay? Have we ever come up with a timeline that says, okay, if we approve it today, you've got a year to spend it, or 18 months, or do we have anything in our ordinance, bylaws, or whatever we call it?
Yeah, and I don't know if this is the best answer, but it's sort of what the answer is at the moment. This committee, when it approves a project or a staff recommendation, is also recommending a completion date for each project. Obviously, those recommendations in terms of length of completion time differ greatly based on the scope of the project. So each awardee is obligated to sign a formal grant agreement that has a hard and fast deadline set.
Because what came about, Matt, is if we have some committed dollars and nobody's spending them after 18 months, or whatever that is, those dollars then would become available for.
Sure.
I think what we said is they have to come back to us to extend it.
Yeah.
Like if there's like a, I don't know, national pandemic or worldwide thing, then we might give them more time.
And we do have the right to both rescind dollars if we want to, for whatever reason that may be. But we do, I did want to note that we do put timelines in their grant agreements. That does
I was
hold-
assuming so, but it just,
Yeah.
it seemed like we had an awful lot of committed that had been out there for a period of time.
Sure. Yeah, the only thing I would say is that the timeline is generally never consistent because projects
project's
differ.
different,
They
yeah.
differ in scope. Some are 3 months, some are 18 months, based on the scope that those folks are looking to undertake. So with all that said, the punchline is we're sitting on 250K, and we internally have a comfort level with freeing up about 150 programmatically for this calendar year. Unrelated to this committee, but I did want to note, because some of you may be unaware, the city did get additional COVID-related community development block grant dollars in an amount of about $483,000. Go to various types of uses that help.
You agree with Michelle? I just was.
Yeah.
We're the finance committee meeting on Friday.
No. And out of that, almost 500,000, we did allocate roughly about 170,000 to economic development. Now, the linchpin is it's got to be to projects that are either helping offset their economic losses due to the pandemic, or to undertake construction projects that will limit the spread of COVID. A good example is a restaurant that wants to put in a patio. That's an eligible expense. If someone wants to expand their space so they can spread their tables out farther, that's an eligible expense. So we will have this 150 to put onto the streets, but we also will have probably another 170 through CDBG to allocate to programs as well, that I just wanted everyone to be aware of, that we're hoping to probably make available by the end of the month. And we'll get the word out when those are available, but it's another resource we have to offer, which I think is important. So with that, happy to answer any more questions.
So we've got all the staffed ones that you have reviewed. obviously there were none, or are you just saying we don't have to act on any?
Yeah, for
There's
staff.
none there, I'm not sure how to take that.
Yeah, since we met last time till this meeting, there have been no staff-approved applications as we've basically put the program on hiatus till now. So there's nothing to act on. It's always on the agenda. I just put none in there since there's nothing to act on.
Before we go on to, can you tell me what happened to Chris Andrews, that he didn't take the money?
Simply said he didn't plan on undertaking his signage
Oh, that's
project.
Yeah.
His 7,500 was he had about $50,000 in signage that he wanted to do. And he told us about 3 weeks ago he wasn't moving forward and to please rescind his grant.
And if you have the information, great. If not, then can you give us like a little update on where the other ones are, specifically
Yeah.
the Market Street Collective?
Market Street Collective, if anyone will remember, they're supposed to be done by the end of the year. I view that as unlikely. They're moving very slow, but they're moving so much so that they actually went to, was it Board of Zoning Appeals or Planning Commission?
They got a site plan approval through Planning Commission at last month's meeting.
That's the old grocery store, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they just got site plan approval and hopefully look to start construction soon.
And that's the old Cardinal building.
Yes,
And I
exactly.
got 450,000 that my wife still wants to know where it's at.
I say, you know that one well, Al, don't you? You know that spot well, right?
Erie Residential Living, that's the small nonprofit building at Wayne and East Park. It was an exterior facade
Yeah.
project.
Actually, it's starting to look nice. 'Cause
Yeah.
Now I cut back through there to get around because of Columbus Avenue closed, so.
Yeah, that's going to look great when it's done. Lake Erie Shores and Islands, per Larry Fletcher this morning, they actually hope to move in 1, 2, 3 weeks. So my guess is we're going to disperse both of their grants. They have a $4,000 one and a $10,000 one. We're probably going to close that out as early as this month. And then Omeka Inc., which is actually Cameo. Candidly, I think we're talking to Matt right now. We're probably just going to ask him to rescind that and reapply when he's ready to go. He was going to do about a $50,000 to $60,000 fire suppression system for his whole building. Not moving forward at the moment until he gets on better footing with everything that's going on. So I've basically just asked Matt if he'd be willing to, without us having to take it, to just voluntarily rescind.
Would he be somebody that would apply for the 483 or whatever those funds?
Yeah, if we can logically and reasonably show a connection to the scope of work.
Not even that scope, but I would assume he had some, I see on Facebook he has some type of machine that, I don't know if you've seen it. I don't know, it's supposed to detect, I don't know, you have to look it up, but I know he's put some money in the COVID response type stuff, but.
Yeah, I mean, if it's related to that, he could apply for our new funds. But, and then, yeah, Toft Funeral Home, that's probably going to be closed out in the next couple weeks. They're doing a modest expansion to their facility as well. So those are all the pre-2020 projects.
Anybody have any other questions about the economic spreadsheet? If not, it looks like we do have one application.
All right. And I will note, if anyone needs to be reminded of the property, at the very back of your packets, if anyone wants them, there's several photos of the property. But the property in question, most of us are familiar with. It's 333 East Washington. It's the big white house just east of Hartung Title Agency, formerly, well, still currently owned by the Avalones, but big, large Victorian historic property. But the project in question is the fact that the property is right now under contract with a group of investors, entrepreneurs from Cleveland, although they do have local roots. Brent Zimmerman, the managing member, is actually from Bellevue. But just to give a little background on the applicant, which is Name One Yellowstone LLC. It's a single-purpose entity for this project. It's made up of 3 members of the Zimmerman family. Brent, the younger son, is the managing member of that company. Brent, for those of you who know him or know of him, very bright young entrepreneur. He got his background in owning several franchises and doing real estate management and development in Columbus. But most recently, he's gotten into the craft brewing arena. He's the owner of Saucy Brew Works, which is a highly successful craft brewing facility and restaurant in Ohio City. He also just recently opened one up in Columbus. And he's also developing a huge production facility in Independence related to that brewery. But he's also done several real estate development projects. Actually, the development he lives in downtown Cleveland is a series of 16 townhouses that he built and lives in. And he's just finishing construction on a 30-plus unit apartment project in Ohio City on Lorraine Avenue. So a very successful developer. But again, he's been kicking the tires in the Sandusky area for several years. And he's always been late to pull the trigger and missed out on several properties. So he's very excited to have landed what will be the first of many projects in Sandusky. Again, he's under contract at the moment to purchase the property on East Washington Street. And his vision for that is to do about a $700,000 development that will convert that into 5 very high-end Airbnb, VRBO lodging units. Just on the east side of downtown. He also anticipates having sort of a small coffee bar and also brew pub area in the building as well. The property will be managed by a full-service property management company and will employ property management, cleaning, and accounting staff for the facility. And his goal is to be done with construction in early 2021 in advance of the vacation season in 2021. So on the second page of the summary, you can see his sources and uses. He's got it under contract for $190,000, planning to invest $400,000 in hard construction costs and another $50,000 in soft costs. He's putting $60,000 of his own equity in the deal, which he has provided us evidence of. And included in the packet is a commitment letter as well from a first mortgage lender for $530,000, meaning his request of the city was for $50,000 for the project. That grant amount, which has been recommended by staff to this committee, is about 8% of the project costs. And even when you deduct out the acquisition costs, it's about 11%. And we have tried to, as best as we can, at the staff level and through this committee, to try to do 10% of project costs on all substantial redevelopment projects, whether that was the Fike Building or BGSU, Bob Hare's projects. So we believe this is warranted for this project. So with that said, our recommendation is to do $50,000 in substantial development grants to the Zimmerman family. In our opinion, the property's been vacant for many, many years. We're getting a 6-figure plus investment into this, and what we're really seeing is the investment happening downtown starting to bleed eastward, which is a good sign, whether it's BGSU to Crimus Grocery, and now to this portion, which completes that block. And we really do see a huge, huge demand in Airbnb and VRBO. It's an emerging market that I think is going to last the pandemic as people are looking to do much more simpler stays, but also closer to home. We do think this is an untapped market with unmet demand at the moment, and this will just start to attempt to try to put a dent in that demand. And obviously the city will continue to receive bed tax and income tax revenue from this project. The remainder of the packet is Mr. Zimmerman's application, copy of the purchase agreement, his bank commitment letter, and then several photos of the property. Let's take a look at those.
I am assuming zoning's okay down there for whatever he's doing, or does he have to get rezoned?
It's zoned a downtown business district, so it's pretty wide open with what he's able to do, including transient rental and the other uses mentioned.
And in other words, having a small brewery and coffee shop, and that's all part of that.
Yeah, in the back of the property, will be turned into sort of an amenity zone for the people that are staying at the facility, where the current sort of parking area is.
So I work with the current owner of the property. I don't know if that creates a conflict or not, but
I'm sorry.
I work with the current owner of the property, the seller. So I don't know if that makes a difference or not, but
I don't know where that would have any, because they're not part of the application.
Now they're getting 640,000, or whatever the sales price.
190 is.
190. I mean,
I'll leave that
if
to you.
I wouldn't vote.
Wouldn't vote.
We didn't even need you here today.
It's probably better.
You said it's been vacant around 5 years?
At least since, that's the longest that I've ever been told of known. I've never seen it occupied since I've been here, yeah.
I move to approve.
We have a motion to approve, Matt, the recommendation.
Recommendation, no. Yep.
Second.
Second. The discussion? Again, one more empty building that could get filled very nicely. All in favor, say aye.
I would add, even though not voting on this one, just in general, I have concerns about funding VRBO remodels. I mean, because to me, that's not a traditional economic development type of purpose of this committee, because it's essentially a residential house, and I don't know what would stop me if I had my own rental unit to come in and say, hey, I want money from the committee. In general, not just this project in general, but VRBOs to me is a slippery slope, because, you know, you approve one, and then anybody that wants to do a VRBO on any house is going to come in and ask us for money. And maybe we want to do that. I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there as a,
And I guess
something
my
to think
question,
about.
in difference, I agree with what you're saying, but things are changing so rapidly, how rentals are being done, you know, with the Airbnb and everything. So, I mean, I think we have to look at each thing separately.
Yeah, and I would just say, because this is obviously the first one that's come to us, although it's not the first lodging project we've received, but how the lodging is occupied is certainly different. But, you know, whether it's been tax abatements for Holiday Inn Express or grants and loans we've provided to Hotel Kilbourne, I think we felt at the staff level that, yes, it's VRBO, but it's a commercial property. It's 4+ units. It's a lot more lodging to us and hotel in terms of generic general use than it is for someone, say, I want to renovate my basement to have a singular transient rental unit, which obviously we don't think is appropriate, but I think we felt this is much more hotel lodging, which we have considered, which is why we thought it at least warranted bringing to this committee.
It's also going to bring in revenue with the tax too.
And tax and bed tax.
And I think I agree with you, but the fact that it's in a place that it's allowed to be, I don't think this is the one that I was going to put my foot down, but this was on Central Ave. I don't think I'd be voting for it.
Well, we have a motion and a second. Any other further discussion? Not all in favor, say aye.
We can take a roll call, so Mr. Cook can abstain.
Yeah, just indicate in the minutes that Paul could abstain from voting.
Okay.
So let's still do a roll call. Greg?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Nick? Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
We're good. Passes.
Good. Okay. And again, I didn't want to get into too much detail as to what may happen next, but I do think it's important that we are already in ongoing negotiations with Mr. Zimmerman and his team at looking at other new construction sites. So I didn't want to sort of stack the deck and say, you know, we've got to do this so he can make other investments. But I truly believe he's the kind of person, he doesn't do just one project. And this is probably just a start for him and his team in Sandusky. So there will be many, many more developments likely from him and his team in Sandusky. And not necessarily just all VRBO related. As we know, he's quite the entrepreneur with several different businesses, and I expect him to bring several of those to Sandusky. So this is a good start.
And there's just the next meeting is scheduled for August 11th if needed.
I will, we're working on at least two very critical and important projects. So as of now, I do think we're going to keep that date, assuming we get everything in. We've got some pretty exciting things coming down the pike, hopefully.
Okay.
So as of now, yeah, I put tentative, but, and as soon as we don't need the meeting, we'll let everyone know as soon as possible. But as of now, it looks like we'll have it.
Okay. It's on the calendar, so I have to take it off instead of putting it on, so. Anybody have anything else?
Motion to
Not,
adjourn.
meeting adjourned. Thank you.